Hello and welcome to a very special edition of BuilderX video series. You've seen us do Meet the Analyst and you've seen us do From the Helm, but we thought we'd bring them together in one exciting video today by bringing in Bell Potter's research analyst, resources research analyst, Regan Burrows, and Duncan Craib, the Managing Director and CEO of Boss Energy. Now this video aims to help you understand the fundamentals of analysing a business from a research point of view and understand the outlook for a company like Boss Energy from Duncan and from the Helm. Regan, I'll start with you today. Thank you so much for your time. You've covered Boss for quite some time now. What attracted you to the company?
Yeah, I guess in the case of Boss, you look, obviously the commodity, we're quite happy with uranium over the long term. Then you sort of go down the check boxes that you sort of would go through in any process looking at a business, and you look at asset, location, jurisdiction, operating costs, where they would sit on the cost curve. And we like those from Boss's point of view. Also being a restart asset, you've got some track record there to look back historically how the asset was run and what Duncan and his team are going to do sort of differently in the next couple of months.
Now, Duncan, we are so close to first production in December. 2023 has been a massive year for you. What does the last 6 months look like and how close are we?
Well, we're really close. In fact, we're months away from first production. So it's been a phenomenal year. I think 2023 will be the year that the Western fuel cycle came back into, it's revived, back into action. So our last 6 months has been focused on really the construction activities on site. So by that, we're self-performing, which means that we do our own engineering, procurement and actual construction. So it's a very, very busy period on site. In fact, 95% of hours spent on site are from our own employees. Very busy, set to produce in the next few months.
I have seen the photos of the mine site. They're looking very, very good. Now, Regan, can you please explain how you analyse Boss Energy and how you got to your price target and your rating at the moment?
Certainly. So as I said before, you look at the commodity, and that's quite important for these types of businesses. They sell a homogenous product at the end of the day. So you've got to be comfortable around the macro, and we could see the drivers for uranium going forward. And significant tailwinds, and that's what sort of excited us to the commodity. So we take a view around prices, take a review around sort of reactor build-outs and consumption, and also on the supply side. So that's where we sort of start, and then we move into the asset. So we have a look at Boss, and obviously having that track record historically is sort of a good starting point. And then we move forward and make some assumptions around how the asset's going to operate and how long it's going to operate for. I think the thing that sort of struck me was that Boss's initial 11-year mine life could be extended. And I don't think many people in the market at the time, going back when we initiated, actually sort of viewed that. We're really sort of discounting it on an 11-year mine life, which isn't the correct way to look at it, which is what we thought. And that's how we sort of build our investment case, and then the valuation really is just a number that we analyse and discount back to today.
Exactly what investors want to hear, and especially from you who lives and breathes this kind of thing. Now, Duncan, a lot of countries, an increasing amount of countries around the world, are committing to nuclear. How important is the timing of Boss coming online and significant at this time? Oh,
it's hugely significant. I've just flown back from the US where I was at the NEI conference presenting, and just the outpouring of interest in Australian production is phenomenal from fuel buyers. So essentially Western producers, Western utilities are looking for Western supply, and the timing is now really. They're looking to wean themselves off Russian material. They're looking to find and contract with countries that are friendly and favourably disposed to uranium production, and that's where Australia sets in. So the timing now is ideal. A lot of mobile inventory has been soaked up in the last couple of years. The timing's tight, there's a deficit of supply, so we're right there at the right time to come into production.
Exactly what we want to hear. Now, Regan, how often do you meet with Duncan, and what questions do you ask him?
Yeah, unfortunately for Duncan, I pester him pretty regularly. And it's mainly around sort of the macro side of things, what's happening at these conferences, what's happening sort of with, I guess, some of the parties who are transacting sort of long-term offtake volumes. And it's just getting a sense and a feel of the market. So I call Duncan pretty regularly. But yeah, it's about sort of updating that constant communication between the analyst and the companies that you're covering, and making sure that the information that we're providing in our valuation is always refreshed and always accurate.
It's good for our investors to know exactly how often you're talking, because then we see your reports come out and that's exactly what they want to hear. Now, Duncan, offtake agreements are huge in mining. Any update on the offtake agreements?
We are heavily engaged with a number of potential fuel buyers. The main way that a contract is entered into, so they do request for proposals, which is an RFP, or off-market discussions, so we're doing a combination of both. And then typically you enter into what's called an LOI to commence proceedings. And then it's like a 3 to 6 month process of actually contract negotiation. So I'm very confident that we'll be announcing a contract before we start production.
Either way, the outlook's very strong. And talking about outlook, more broadly on the uranium space and the fundamentals from an analyst point of view, what's your outlook on uranium for not only the next 12 months, but the years to come?
Yeah, so it's obviously very positive, and we just published we do a monthly uranium sector musings piece, and that's more sort of a very high level, broad overview sort of view. And in that we look at which countries are developing nuclear, which ones are sort of either restarting the reactors or extending the life of the reactors. And we look at sort of forward guidance from organisations like the IEA and also the WNA. And if you take, for example, at the World Nuclear Association Symposium back in September, they said that they wanted to triple capacity by 2050. Now, if you back that out and say, okay, well, if you're starting where we are today, what that means from a raw uranium point of view, that's how we sort of come to our numbers around the supply and the demand. And it's very exciting. You can see the tailwinds for nuclear. It's a fuel source that is well studied and well understood, and it has to be part of the discussion in decarbonisation.
Absolutely. Now, talking about uranium, obviously, and nuclear, there's a lot of noise about Australia's ability to sell uranium, mining it here, legislations. Can you please just provide a brief outline, Duncan, on exactly what makes the Honeymoon mine so different, what permits you've had to go through, the extensive length to get the mine underway?
Thank you. I do state, and I firmly believe that South Australia is the premier uranium state currently in Australia. And I say that because the only two existing mines that produce uranium are in South Australia, being Olympic Dam and the Heathgate operation, which is 4 Mile, is their deposit. So Honeymoon's destined to be that state's third producing uranium mine, and for that matter, the first in Australia in the last decade to come into production. So from a state perspective, all sides of government are completely behind uranium mining. What that then leads to is just a favourable disposition when you go through the permitting process, when you engage with government. It really opens up the corridors of goodwill to get the mine up and running. But for us, the key aspect now on permitting side is the export permit, which we have. So an export permit, only 4 mines in Australia have one of those, the 2 mines I mentioned, plus Ranger, which is being decommissioned. But to have an export permit means that all your other permits are in good working order. So we are regularly audited on our permits. We're meeting with government quarterly, both state and federal, to go through those permit processes, and we're all set to go. So yeah, I mean, to describe the amount of permits, I'd say uranium's probably the most heavily regulated form of mining in Australia. So almost picture an A3 sheet of paper with, font 8 print throughout, covered with permits. So it's a lot to get through, but yeah, we're on top of it.
Absolutely. Understanding that's good to go is huge. Now, obviously talking legislation, Regan, from your point of view, do you see legislation changing in the future? Because Australia obviously is very strict on uranium mining at the moment. So do you see that in the pipeline, or would you like to see that in the pipeline?
It would be good. Australia's obviously got the largest reserves and resources for uranium across the globe, and the fact that we're very, very small in the overall mining and processing uranium is actually quite surprising. I think at some point governments will see the economic benefits of uranium mining, also displacing sort of declining mining operations, say in coal in Queensland, for example. There's an opportunity there, but I think it's longer term, and I think, as we spoke before, Australia and Australia's views around nuclear aren't going to dent the sort of outlook for the commodity going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, do you have an exact timeline to production, like a date, time, what's involved for any investors out there who don't know exactly what goes into the first production?
Well, not an exact date per se, but what we have started is flushing the well field. So that's the commencement of mining, which started 3 weeks ago. So that's going well. So essentially removing some of the calcium from the actual ore body. And you do that to prep the ore body, getting ready to then start your actual production flow rate. So that's underway. That's the first step. The next step is starting to commission the processing plant, which commences with the start of the ion exchange column and the elution column. The ion exchange column, the first one, is just about complete. It's all been erected and the steel work around it, so that's quite exciting. From there, the fluid will go into the precipitation circuit, which is currently being refurbished, and then into the drying centre, or drying room, which is essentially, we're putting these 2 new high temperature calciners in to produce, or basically bake the product at a higher temperature to produce U3O8. So essentially, that process of commissioning the plant will happen over a number of months, but we believe by the end of February next year we'll have our first drums of uranium being produced and ready for export. So it's very, very close. And then from there, it's a gradual ramp up as we get more familiar with the plant over 2 years to reach that nameplate capacity of 2.45 million pounds per annum.
What an incredible time to have you with us right now, and how exciting. Thank you so much. Regan, more broadly on your scope, because your resources is where you specialise, what commodities stand out for you in 2024 and why?
Yeah, there's a couple. So I guess looking at sort of anything tied to the electrification theme is going to have its sort of peaks and troughs over the next couple of years, but you can see sort of the trajectory there and the amount of support for those commodities. So in particular, I like graphite and rare earths. Both are sort of at cyclical lows, but both are sort of covered by this concentration of the supply chain within China. So graphite is something like 90 to 95% of the graphite supply chain, which goes into the anode for your electric vehicle battery, is controlled and dominated by China, and we don't have any sort of China supply chains for that. And rare earths is quite similar. Obviously, we've got Lynas operating out in Kalgoorlie and in Malaysia as really the only ex-China source of rare earths. So I see a lot of support for those commodities going forward. And yeah, in together with uranium as well, I view them quite positively.
Well, you've heard it here from the Helm and from the analyst. I hope you enjoyed that episode, the very special edition episode today. My name is Grady Wolf, market analyst at Bell Direct, and I really hope you enjoyed your time today with Regan and Duncan. If you did, why not subscribe to our YouTube channel, where you can keep up to date with all market commentary, interviews and analysis.